Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. This is a workshop on what role of cohesion policy post 2020. I'm glad to be being invited by the Master Center and Agerb from Bulgaria to facilitate this session. We are going to have a keynote speaker from Siegfried Mureșan from Romania, Vice Chair of the Committee of Budgets. And then we're waiting for Mr. Van Listenroy and Mr. Schneider, which I believe they are in the CUR because I was meant to be there as well. My name is Serafin Pazos. I am from Galicia in Spain. I work for, my day job is in the Convention of Scottish Local Authorities, and for many years I've been the chair of the Cohesion Expert Group of the CMR, the European Municipalities Association. For all these three things, given my life trajectory as I just described, what's going to happen next week and the weeks ahead, it's quite significant. We are not going to just talk about money and budget. We're going to see about the future of Europe and how we keep this continent moving forward. For that reason, I think it's important to start with a general picture, which will be provided by Mr. Mureșan. I should say that he is Vice Chair of the Committee of Budgets, and though I believe has not been that many years in MEP, has been 8 times rapporteur, 29 shadow rapporteur, and also rapporteur of 2 opinions, so an impressive record. So perhaps we could start with providing, given that I believe as well you're being even doing some recent reports on the flexibility of the EU budget and the how the budget is performing at the moment. You will probably be able to provide a general picture of where we are to kick off the discussion. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So should I talk from here? Maybe not necessarily. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this session on such a busy day with many interesting sessions where, because of the rich quality of the diversity of the audience, one always finds out new things, new perspectives. And the discussion about the future of the EU budget is exactly the type of the discussion where the voice of everyone needs to be heard. Because at the end of the day, my true belief is that this discussion is strongly linked with the discussion and with the question, what Europe do we want in the next 10 years? And firstly, of course, we should decide, when we talk about the budget, we should indeed decide the political priorities for the Union for the next 10 years. What do we expect the Union to deliver for the citizens? And afterwards, after these priorities are decided and determined, only afterwards should we discuss concrete figures, concrete numbers for the budget. Because if we start the other way around, by my member state Romania saying that we would want to have in the next MFF 40 billion euros receiving, and by another member state saying we want 30, and by another member state saying we want to pay not more than 20, or the other one not more than 30, then the discussion will be firstly divisive, secondly leading nowhere and unconclusive, and thirdly, it will have nothing to do with, of course, the political priorities and what we expect from the Union. That is why I say, once the European Commission puts forward a first proposal, a first reflection on the 2nd of May, once this happens, we in the Parliament and the Member States in the Council should sit down and discuss what are our political priorities for the next 10 years. What do we want to finance through the EU budget from 2021 to 2027? And my belief is that it should be a combination of traditional policies and of new policies, new priorities. When it comes to the traditional priorities financed through the EU budget, cohesion and agriculture policy, I think these have to be important in the future as well, because cohesion is about helping the least developed countries to catch up. Cohesion is about improving the competitiveness of an economy. It's about building highways, building railways, building bridges, doing energy efficiency works. It's about It's about improving, as I said, the competitiveness of a country, of an economy at the end of the day. Do we have to update cohesion policy to modernize it? We might. And if we come to the conclusion that we might have to update it to put forward additional conditionality to make sure that while we are giving countries money to improve their competitiveness through EU financing, they should in parallel not make decisions which would worsen their competitiveness in terms of public administration, in terms of salary in the public sector, in terms of retirement systems and so on. So I say cohesion policy continues to be important. It's about the competitiveness of our economy. It's very much future related, and if we need to improve, modernize, update it, we should be ready to do so. I say that the second traditional policy, agriculture, should continue to stay important as well, because it's about food safety, food security. It's about opportunity in rural areas. It's about creating jobs for farmers in rural areas. And this year, for example, when I am the general rapporteur for the EU budget 2018, we have managed to allocate more funding for young farmers to facilitate the transition of farms from older individuals to younger individuals. So support for young farmers. So I say, in terms of how the EU should look like, what our priorities should be, I say the two main priorities from the EU budget, cohesion and agriculture, should stay important. And we should strike the right balance between these two traditional policies and what our new priorities are. And what are our new priorities? Firstly, research and innovation. This makes our economy future-oriented, knowledge-based. This is exactly what we need in order to strive in competition with other economies in the global economy. So research innovation is a new priority. Erasmus. And Erasmus is not only a nice program for students, but Erasmus research shows us that more than 60% of employers appreciate international experience of young people. So your chance to find a job is much higher if you are part of the Erasmus program, and your chance of finding a job is much higher not only abroad, but even at home in your home country. Hello, welcome, good afternoon, nice to see you, Michael. So Erasmus, it's about the competitiveness of young people in Europe all over the Union, and it's an essential tool for making labor mobility finally work in Europe. Then combating terrorism, tackling the migration refugee crisis, improving the border of the control of our external borders, through, of course, enforcing Frontex, all agencies of the Union which have responsibility in justice, home affairs, being active and engaged in our immediate neighborhood, be it in the south or the east, because we can only be safe within the borders of Europe if we are surrounded by a group of safe, stable countries. So these are new priorities. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, the United Kingdom leaves us. It's unfortunate. We did not want that. We did not call the referendum. We did not organize it. We did not lose it. But that's the decision of the British people. We have to respect. We have to live with. The United Kingdom, with all of its rebates, it's still a country that contributed more to the budget of the Union than it benefited. So at the end of the day, there will be a missing of 12, 13, 14, depending a bit from year to year, billion euros per year. So we are in the situation in which I say traditional priorities should continue to be important, and we need to finance new priorities. And the United Kingdom is leaving, so there is a gap. And the first element, the first question in the room would be, once we agree on the political priorities, how much money we need in total. And it's obvious that you cannot do much more, finance new priorities with less money. Of course, we want to improve the performance of the EU budget, improve efficiency, and we have done work on this in the Parliament and other institutions as well. How can we reduce the cost of financing? How can we make sure that we obtain more per euro spent? This is a preoccupation of ours, and it's important because citizens, voters expect us to make sure that every euro reaches their targets. So we will improve the efficiency, we will improve the implementation, we will make sure that the results are as big as possible per every euro spent, but at the end of the day, you cannot do much more with much less. This is why the position of the Parliament is that we need a realistic increase of the budget, from approximately 1% of GDP, which we have now, to about 1.3% of GDP. And you cannot say also as a member state that you want a better protection of external borders and then not give the union enough money to do that. So what I want to say is that once we politically make decisions between member states and between parliament, we should also allocate resources from it. And it's essential to agree on the political priorities first, because otherwise, as I said, the discussion would be divisive, and we would continue to be in this thinking, which I am not supportive of separation between net contributors and net recipients. And I think this is the time to overcome this division, because by building a highway in Bulgaria, it is not only the Bulgarian economy or the Bulgarian citizen that benefits, but it's everyone in the single market, because we are a single market in which we have free movement of people, of goods, of services, of capital. And by building a highway in Bulgaria, of course, the people of Bulgaria will be the main beneficiary, but it's easier and it's cheaper to transfer European goods to the people of Bulgaria. It's easier and cheaper to transfer Bulgarian goods to the customers and to the enterprises all over Europe. So we need to overcome this division between net beneficiaries, net recipients, and look to the benefits of this. This overall. Of course, simplification is something which very often beneficiaries make us aware of, particularly small beneficiaries, NGOs, entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, 3 students launching a business. We need to make it easier for them to access financing, especially if the amounts are small. Learn from best practices, and in member states, try to simplify and try to standardize, try to export as much in terms of best practices as possible. It's obvious that tackling fraud, irregularities, corruption should be an essential part of implementing the EU budget within the member states and also in the neighborhood. I think I should stop here from the beginning. I think you gave me a limited number of minutes. Of course, I'm happy to take questions, and I'm looking forward to the discussion with Michael and all of you. Thank you very much for coming, for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to welcome Michael Schneider, envoy of the State of Saxony-Anhalt to the federal government, president of the EPP in the Committee of the Regions. He's obviously going to reflect on your quite comprehensive introduction, quite passionate defense of an ambitious yet effective EU budget. But while we give the floor to him, I would just make the question of, because you work on the day-to-day of the managing of the budget and the supervising of the budget and all that detail. I'm sure there is in this room people who are perhaps like Mr. Nistelrooy, Mr. Schneider and myself, who are very passionate about cohesion policy, or others, because this comes from people from all over Europe, will be less passionate about that. And one thing that is always raised about cohesion policy is that it's not performing in terms of a lot of money is not spent, and some of that goes back to the member states. And we have heard that this perhaps in this period has been even worse than other occasions. Other data suggests otherwise. But because you are actually supervising that year on year, is there any truth that this current period is worse and that the cohesion policy is as badly performing as some people are suggesting?
Look, the truth with this period is the following. Firstly, we were late in making the big political decisions at European level. We only made them throughout the year 2013, which means that on the 1st of January 2014, when money was supposed to flow, nothing was ready at national, at regional level for money to flow. And part of the responsibility for that is with us, is at European level, with the Council and also with us, with the Parliament. This is part of the truth. And we should avoid this at any price next time. How to avoid it? We should avoid it through a quick, swift adoption of the next Multiannual Financial Framework, which has to enter into force on the 1st of January 2021. The European Commission will present its proposal next week on the 2nd of May, and my opinion is that we should adopt it before the European election because of 3 reasons. if we don't adopt it before the European election, we will have a very difficult election campaign. We will have the populists on the right who will say Europe is bad, the EU budget is bad, you are overspending, you're not spending money well, there is corruption, there is fraud. I can already hear the Nigel Farages of this world. And then there is the populists on the left who will say we want a huge budget, we want to spend a lot, not 1.3% of GDP, but 2, 3, 4%. We want a budget for the Eurozone, and so on and so on. And we know the populists of the left, they always talk about a big budget, they talk about what they want to spend it on, but they never explain where they would bring the money from. And we, responsible pro-Europeans, center-right politicians, will be squeezed in the middle with a very difficult European election campaign. The second negative consequence is the political uncertainty after the European election. There will be a parliament. What will be the majority in the next parliament? When will it become functional? At some point throughout 2019, but then the term of the Commission ends 30th of October. There will be a new Commission, there will be a new President of the European Council starting 1st of December, and he is essential to coordinate negotiations of heads of state and government in the Council. So de facto, if we will not manage to conclude before the European elections, de facto, we will work on it in 2020, and we will only adopt it at some point late in 2020. And this brings me to the third negative consequence of not adopting it before the European election, which is, again, nothing will be ready on the 1st of January 2021. Yeah. And you are right. Implementation of the current MFF is slow. Not much was absorbed in 2014, 15, 16, particularly in cohesion policy. So you could pose the legitimate question, but no problem if the new MFF is not ready on the 1st of January 2021, because you still have unabsorbed money from the current MFF, which based on the so-called N+3 rule can be absorbed until the 31st of December 2023. And partly you would be right, but not completely, because on the 31st of December 2020, not everything will be absorbed from cohesion policy. There will still be money left that you can absorb in 21, 22, 23. But in some areas, all of the money would be absorbed. In Erasmus, where demand is 2 times higher than we have money available. Research innovation, Horizon 2020, implementation rate is close to 100%. Agriculture, where payments are done on a quasi-automatic way. Security, tackling migration, refugee crisis, there also we need to do much more than was initially planned. So what I want to say is, although in cohesion policy money would not be absorbed, but clearly money would be missing in other areas. This is why it's essential to adopt it before the European election. And this, I think, also answers your question of why we are so late, because of the European political decision, because of the implementation at national level. Take just an example. My home country, Romania, in April 2017, 3 years into the MFF, we only had accredited 2 out of 10 payment agencies. The payment agency is the institution which you basically need to reimburse the bills of beneficiaries. And if you don't have those agencies accredited and launched, you cannot pay. It's like you don't have a cash to pay from, and you have a bottleneck. Now we have all accredited, and most of the member states have all of those accredited. So quicker decision at European level, then the implementation at national level, and of course it's the standardization, simplification, which I was talking also a bit about in my introduction.
Thank you very much. I think it's a good open discussion in terms of the overall picture of the budget, but I think we now perhaps would like to welcome Lambert van Nistelrooy from the European Parliament, an advocate of cohesion policy for many, many years. You please, when you can, take the floor. But I would like to, in the meantime, introduce properly Michael Schneider. As I was saying earlier, he's an envoy of the envoy of State of Saxony-Anhalt to the federal government, president of the EPP group in the Committee of the Regions. But perhaps more importantly for today's discussion, he's literally in the history books of cohesion policy because of his long-standing commitment and work at the European level on cohesion policy. I think one of the first opinions I ever worked on in the Committee of the Regions was already his opinion many, many years ago, and he has been basically the lead rapporteur in most of the proposals of the cohesion policy for all these years, including the last one. So from that perspective, he has like a very detailed view of what are the problems coming from the regions, for the national authorities, but also the ideas that have come from the ground and that, I have to say, with a lot of negotiation, we have come with a very strong position from the subnational level that he's now advocating. So without further introduction, maybe you'd like to outline these broad views as a kick-off discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for your introduction. To tell you the truth, we are momentarily working on my collected opinions in 12 volumes. I hope you will like it. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to talk about. The moment is not so easy for making speeches on budget and cohesion policy. We can repeat what we have said in the last 12 months or so, but maybe next Wednesday, some of it, most of it, I don't know, might be wrong compared to the proposals that will be content of the multi-annual framework. Only compared to that in itself, our proposals will not be wrong if they are different from what will be the decision of the European Commission. So what I can do is repeat some essential demands and positions from our point of view, from the Committee of the Regions. That means from the regions and the local authorities in the European Union. Because as our opinion on the future of cohesion policy that we adopted 1 year ago had 99.9% approval in the Committee of the Regions, I think I may really say that this opinion is the position of the local and regional authorities in the European Union. First is budget. We haven't said that we haven't named numbers. We have talked about proportions, and this is still our position. We think at least 1/3 of the multi-annual framework must be dedicated to cohesion policy in the future, so that all the expectations that we have concerning all the details and all the goals and objectives of cohesion policy could be fulfilled. If it's less, if it's visibly less, then the system of cohesion policy, the structure of cohesion policy that we have today, must be reduced. And this exactly is what we reject. This idea, and we need a budget that is approved in time. I can subscribe everything that you have said. I can underline everything that you have said, and maybe it's interesting to underline it from the point of view of those who implement the structural funds, who draft the operational programs. I'm a member of a regional government with legislative power, and in my region, Saxony-Anhalt, East Germany, we are responsible for the operational program and for everything that has to do with it, and we are behind the plan, as all the other regions are. We are not the only ones, and you have named the reasons: late adoption of everything that had to be adopted. Late approval of our drafts of operational programs. Already 1 year or even more had passed when we could start to spend the first euro, to try to spend the first euro. And there was something technical, but which cost a lot of time, really a lot of time. This so-called designation process of the managing authority and the other authorities that we have. One side point would be that this designation process must not start again in the next period. We demand that this process that has been done, that the results should be also enforced for the next period, so that we don't spend again 1 year, 1.5 years on a new designation process. So we need a timely approval on the multi-annual framework, on the budget. Timely means before the European elections. If not, I don't know. Nobody knows how long it will take. Then, with all the unknown results of the elections and everything, you were absolutely right in everything you said. Then, next point, I already mentioned it. We think that the existing system and architecture of cohesion policy is a good one in general, and we should not invent it new. We should not start at a new point with a new system, a new structure, a new architecture, because this would again cost a lot of time. So what we propose is to improve the existing system and improve the existing structures, and we made a lot of detailed proposals for that. But I don't want to go into those details today. What is important for me is first to keep the architecture. It was a great success, in my view, that we introduced the category of transition regions in this period. I think it worked. It fitted to the reality of the situation of the regions, and we should keep this category also in the future. You know, all the options that have been published by the European Commission. One of the options would be to reduce everything for the weakest regions. We are not in favor of that. We think cohesion policy in the future should be something that everybody can use, every region can use in different ways, of course. And we think the differentiation with regard to the GDP is appropriate. And another point that really should be improved is it's the partnership principle, the idea of multi-level governance, the idea of partnership, of involving the local and regional levels in every kind of implementation and decision-making process. As you maybe know, I'm a member of the task force on subsidiarity of Jean-Claude Juncker, and in this task force we are debating about exactly this question: how can we improve this partnership idea? How can we improve the involvement of local and regional authorities in all the decision-making processes to improve the principles of subsidiarity and proportionality? And cohesion policy, structural funds is one of the, for me, one of the main areas where this principle of subsidiarity, by involving local and regional authorities, can be improved. And to reduce here, if anybody thinks about reduce this, what we have today would be absolutely against the idea that is behind this task force on subsidiarity and proportionality. I say this just in case. I don't know. I haven't got secret papers. I don't know. Just in case. So I don't know if I should not speak too long. So maybe in the discussion we can
I could not resist making
please
a question. You're speaking of architecture, so let's move slightly from the budgetary element, more of the policy political one. You discuss very strongly, and it's very strongly reflected in the position of the COR, the need to keep the architecture, and for good reason, because you were one of the lead architects of the current transition category. So it's not just you are in the history books; you're actually in the map of Europe as well, in a certain way.
Sorry,
but you also, I think, you have expressed quite in the past the need to look into new challenges, new goals for cohesion policy that perhaps not sufficiently recognized at the moment. I think you believe, I believe you mentioned on some occasion demographic change,
yes,
and globalization. Being here a devil's advocate, so to speak, what do you think cohesion policy can give in terms of demographic change or globalization adjustment that perhaps national policies cannot fully address themselves.
Well, the problem today is that we have regions, many regions, that are facing severe demographic problems. My region is one of them, but you also have regions in Spain, for example, in Castilla y León, Galicia, and others, and in other member states. And they would like to use the possibilities of structural funds. They would like to use the funds, the money, to invent instruments that work against all the consequences, the economic consequences of a bad demographic development. But the regulation that we have today gives only restricted opportunity to use it. So we need more openness, more flexibility in this part for the future, so that those regions who are economically affected by demographic problems can use also the structural funds. In my region, we have some years ago we had a report by an institute that specialized on demographic questions, and they made a study and came to the result that these demographic problems that we have, aging population, young people who leave the region, low birth rate, that this altogether leads to, they call it a downward spiral, that one problem raises the next problem, and this problem makes the first problem bigger, and so it gets down, and this is so that these regions lose their competitiveness or decrease in competitiveness. They lose investment, and here we are in the middle of the purposes of structural funds, of cohesion policy. That's what cohesion policy, what structural funds is for. But we are in the moment we are not. We have not the flexibility to use it as it could be used in a good way.
Exactly. Excellent. I would like to now, if I may, thank you, give the floor for a small introduction to Lambert Malnistenroy, also one of the leading voices of cohesion policy in the European Parliament, also for many years. It's a friend, I would say, of the regions and local authorities, always ready to actually not just discuss and explain, but also engage with us. He has been rapporteur on many important reports. Reports of. I've been rapporteur on an important piece of legislation, no less the Common Provision Regulation that underpins the current architecture of the structural funds. Another one that is very close to my heart, which is the Code of Conduct of Partnership, which is building once again what Mr. Schneider just mentioned, is what it actually shows that cohesion policy is not just about money, it's about actually ways of working together, ways of actually trying to address the problems we all share. And also he has been, I believe, I know, for instance, very vocal in terms of how other policies and cohesion policy like research and innovation could actually better cooperate with cohesion policy rather than compete, which is what it seems at the moment. We are some people trying to make parts of the cohesion policy compete with other areas rather than actually cooperate. So perhaps, if I may, if you could actually reflect on these issues that I know is very close to your heart as a way by way of introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great to be here to share some ideas and to listen to maybe. Does it work?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we come together some new approaches. Yes, but I think that we have to be even more ambitious. If I see how cohesion policy, we changed it roughly in the period 2014-20, how it is perceived, how visible it is, there we underperform. I think that we have to rethink this partnership not in the sense of multi-level governments working together, state and union and region cities and citizens, but the way we create a partnership. It takes two for tango. And if you look carefully, if a project is finished, it's structural policies. It's not giving money, spending money, not interesting. Go to a bank or do whatever you want. No, it is to have structural changes in economy, in environmental quality, in waste management, take something in the connectivity. So here the effects are to be seen in 4 or 5 years. in a career of someone who does the Erasmus. And there what we do, we don't do anything with this. So I just come from an evaluation project that has been done on this aspect of the European Commission and some universities. And in fact that we communicate in a one-sided way. In fact, if a project is stopped, it is till now legally impossible to have, let me say, with European money, to spread the good news, to have visitors groups or to do whatever. I was in Ljubljana, and there they made a top class with Cohesion Fund waste management system in the city. And this guy said, I'm now under pressure, or whatever under pressure. I don't have time to tell this good story. And it was a very good story, because in this story, it's not just good for the citizens and the goals that we agreed to reduce and to have a affordable price for the citizens, but the German companies came to build it, and the Dutch and the Austrian engineers.
Sorry
So
again.
it paid back. It was a win-win option. And where is this story about these externalities of our policy, combined with the internal market that we have created, that is our central instrument? Then you can see that the net payers spending from the Dutch, it's from every euro in, comes directly back 1.45. In Germany, even more. In Austria, it's 2.2. So talking about net payers and those who eat the money, we have to rethink the relation with our beneficiaries, our citizens, and to do something, because the time has passed that people follow the leaders. We have nationalism, even in Poland. You know, big profit has. Or look to the Brexit, my lord. There you saw no one stood up. How Liverpool has been, let me say, brought to life and creativity. It was not London that neglected them, but the mayor didn't stand up, because it's a question of the citizens and not about the city. It's about UK in the so. Please, we underspoil the possibility to make really partnership. So this is a proposal I could get in, and it will be accepted in the omnibus simplification package. Although it was a strange one, they accepted it. Council accepted it. So that is something. Then the other thing about synergies. My lord, unacceptable situation like we have it. Horizon 2020, it's some 80 billion. It is spent for 90% in the old member states.
Mhm.
Cohesion, 70% new member states. Is this our Europe? Knowledge-driven? Innovation-driven? In the new ICT, big data-related economy? Hello? So the synergy, as you said, between the two funds, Horizon 2020, and there is, the way we created is smart specialization. It means that you make a choice. If you want to do something on demographic, make your choice, but you cannot eat on every dinner, a cafeteria model with Europe. You make a choice. Okay, you make your choice in where the biggest possibility for growth or quality contribution can be in your region, and find the partners that are in the same situation that work like that. There's added value. And sometimes you are number 3, you are the leader, and sometimes you are number 33 in a consortium, or the other way around. And this is the Europe of this territorial cooperation. It should be much stronger. Less giving the envelope and saying good luck with the envelope. I am a member of the parliament, I get never any thanks letters. I don't need them. No, you can take care. But to be a little bit around, we have to be more ambitious, to scale up in a knowledge-driven economy, these kind of cooperation. And this is exactly what you said about all the evaluations. It's not the nose down to the shoes and saying, can we spend the money? The nose should be up in the world competition. Because then you can see what this new generation of bio-based economy means. And it can be done everywhere in Romania, in your country, or in, it's not something about the big cities or like that. What it means to have the circular economy, what it means to have the energy transition. So these are new economies. And when we worked, I had 100 dialogues, exactly what you said, with the ministers. And the ministers came. And they said, we know how cohesion goes, usually from Spain and Portugal. And they said, we make roads. And roads. And make shields of Europe there. But they thought that if you are connected, economy comes. And economy was in Asia. For textile and for leather and for this and that. So this smart specialization that talks about the ecosystem of the schools, of the citizens, of entrepreneurs, public authorities, public contribution also, is essential. And there we have to connect our cohesion policy with the structural changes that come forward out of the European semester about the country structural changes and the country-specific recommendations. And EPP wants to bring these two together because it is ridiculous. Now we spend, I can tell you, in Sicily, when they get again 5 billion for the next 7 years, they have a festivity for a week in the whole island. Everyone free wine. Like that, because they succeeded to keep in the poor category. They can spend the money here and there. This should be ended. So we should be much more demanding, and we will be in the EPP. EPP has made their paper. EPP preparing our step to the elections, and we should do it in that way. Solidarity 3.0. This is what I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We will have. Indeed. We will have a short round of questions immediately, but I couldn't but I would react, and I would try collectively to your contributions in order to also stimulate the debate. We don't know what's going to come in May the 2nd, but I think all in our different responsibilities have heard, have seen some indications that it could be a difficult moment in terms of cohesion policy and the values it underpins. There is this expectation, potentially there will be a separate macro fund on essentially loans and high finance that will fund a lot of things that actually overlap what cohesion policy does. There is also, and I think it's beyond a suspicion, that part of rural policy will move away or might move away in practice from cohesion policy than it is now, therefore making it more difficult to do rural-urban projects or basically aligning funds. This is, of course, something we will discover in a few days, but as this is a meeting of the largest political family in Europe, I would like to have your views about, do you think it's acceptable to have a system where perhaps the good values of cohesion policy are moving away? And for instance, the EPP is a party that believes in enterprise, and therefore financial engineering and things like that is part of the ecosystem. But we fear, and that's the fear that I share more widely in this city, sadly outside this room, that if we move away from what we achieved last time, which is the common provision regulation, having all the different policies, rural, social policy, regional policy, working together, with difficulty working together, that will be a bad thing. And if we have the partnership and grant element, this subsidy element of cohesion policy, just eliminated because there's going to be a bigger fund elsewhere that can have negative effects. But I'm basically biased here, but I would like to just out of polemic to have your reaction if this, what do you think your views if this kind of bad premonition actually turn out to be true in 3 days' time or 4 or 5 days' time? So,
up to me, it's not a threat. It's something additional. So what we want to have is the public authorities at the regional and the city level should be equipped to attract these new financial instruments. Because we pump from one side, every month is now 60 billion into the Eurozone. The money should get somewhere, not just helping banks to survive or whatever. reality, EPP, it's not in our hands, the money, but you know. So if you have in the region, and we have by the Juncker plan, given us by the Committee of the Regions, a stronger position for the regional development banks, they are recognized. They are recognized. In my country, they are recognized.
Theoretically.
Yeah, but if you sleep, you are not awake.
Yeah.
So they get a bigger role to use tailor-made, and if there is demand for this risk-sharing use of the structural funds, this is possible. It is possible under the actual regulation. And it's up to the culture whether you use it or not. So I see it more as an addition, but the question is, where is this authority, where is the philosophy to use it at the regional level? Till now, there might be a threat because the Juncker plan, this FC fund, is like a piece of a cherry on the cake. You get, a project here, a project there, and we have helped so many people and so many jobs. If it's not connected with what the universities and the high schools and the secondary education is doing in specialization in a region, it won't fly. You can help one company but come back in 10 years. I don't know. This policy is and was insufficiently connected what we built from the regional policy. And there I see it for us a strong thing. I think we need more free-floating money in our real economy. And if you did well in the last 30 years with cohesion, you can manage it. You should be able. We should be able. So it's a little bit, I don't say no.
Any?
Lambert just mentioned the 60 billion euros that the ECB is pumping every month into the economy, and then we see that the impact in terms of growth is not necessarily what we have desired because the transmission mechanism of monetary policy doesn't work, and it's a bit the same with cohesion policy. Very often the beneficiaries are telling us it's not the lack of money, but it's the way we would access money, it's delays, it's uncertainty, and particularly for small amounts, it's the cost of accessing money and the uncertainty. And we have done work in the European Parliament about the cost of accessing EU funds. And we came to the conclusion that for large projects, the cost of accessing EU funds is only a small proportion of that, and it's acceptable. But we came to the conclusion that for small projects of small beneficiaries, the cost represents a significant part of the benefit that you would have. Combine that with the uncertainty. So you want to access EU funds, you put forward the project. Most likely you would need a consultant, an advisor, which you have to pay. You put forward the project, maybe you win it, but maybe you don't win it. So we have come to the conclusion that particularly for smaller grants, simplification, which would also mean a reduction of which would also imply reduction of cost, is something which beneficiaries desire. For example, based on current rules now, you have to archive, 5 or 6 years your original documents. We are living in a digital era. So what I'm trying to say is, let's see where we can update, where we can improve, where we can digitalize, keeping, of course, control where it's needed, tackling, preventing fraud, irregularities, but let's see where we can update a bit. Just quickly, you are talking about the 2nd of May, and we are, in view of the proposal of the Commission for the next MFF, we are all afraid how big will be the reduction for cohesion and for agriculture. Fact is that, we are scrutinized, and cohesion policy and agriculture and traditional policies, because, as I said in the beginning, new priorities are coming, and because of Brexit. But as I said in the beginning, we need to strike a balance between traditional priorities, which continue to be important, and new ones. But what I want to say is the current debate about the future of cohesion policy is also an opportunity for us to modernize the policy, update, improve it where needed. And the arguments for cohesion policy are good and are important because it's about improving competitiveness in every corner of Europe. And as Lambert so eloquently explained, it's not only the country where you're building the highway that benefits from the construction of that highway, but it's the citizen in that country and also in other countries that has, access to goods easier, faster. It's companies from the country that the highway was built in that can export faster, but also companies from other corners of the single market that have quicker, faster, easier, more predictable and cheaper access to citizens, to customers, to the rest of the economy. So there are good arguments to defend cohesion policy in this, challenging times. And my last point is financial instruments. They have come, and I'm of the opinion that they have come to stay. We saw FC, we prolonged FC because it was good. I defended it. It was the right thing to launch it, to prolong it. It will be prolonged into the future as well. And of course, we need to have it in a way in which additionality is ensured, in a way that these financial instruments finance projects which otherwise would not have found credits to finance. So what I want to say is FC as well, successful as it is, but we have to stay ready to improve it. But what I want to say is financial instruments, they cannot replace grants. It's two different things. And yes, they are here to stay. Yes, they will be extended, but we should not see them as a replacement for grants. Their scope is different. The beneficiaries are different. And also for FC, we have said when we launched it that we want to finance the best projects without political interference and without any geographical balance, we said. So it's not like we should finance this project in Romania just because it's in Romania and because we have no other project. No, we said we want to finance the best projects irrespective of their country of origin. I think that was correct because only like that you can keep the credibility in the eyes of the private sector, in the sense that, it really finances best projects without any political interference in the decision. I think that was right. I think we should defend that and continue along those lines. But if we are honest, we have to also admit that there are countries within Europe which just are less developed in terms of financial instruments, in terms of experience with public-private partnerships. It's just a fact that the stock market in my home country, in Bucharest, is less developed than the stock market in Frankfurt or Milan. And this means that we have to, in the long term, continue with the same philosophy for financial instruments, finance the best projects, but try to ensure a level playing field. Assist those countries that have less experience with these types of financial instruments, where financial markets are less developed. Assist them with this process of development. There are countries which have promotional banks, which are essential in linking, FC, which is in Luxembourg, with a small beneficiary on the ground, very often small, medium-sized enterprises. Have countries which have promotional banks work together with countries that don't have promotional banks to help them, and the Commission can play a role in this as well, to help them launch promotional banks, because if you don't have a promotional bank, you will have a long-term negative disadvantage, competitive disadvantage, because as I said, financial instruments are here and you will need them in the long term. So yes to financial instruments, but not as a replacement to grants, which they can't be, and work on assisting those countries which are a bit in a disadvantaged position, to help them also tap into that, because if you're looking into FC, for example, newer member states, there's simply new member states of the Union, there simply is a smaller number of projects that they have benefited from, because they have a disadvantage, because the EIB needs to provide more also and more tailor-made technical assistance to the potential beneficiaries there. So yes to financial instruments, as I said, but we have to continue improving them and make sure that beneficiaries in all member states would have access to them.
So some short remarks on some of the issues that have been raised here. Communication, this is really a huge problem. There's a deficit. I had an interview with a journalist from my region yesterday about the future of the budget, and he asked, how does it come that people don't recognize what the EU is doing for them in their regions? When there is a construction, you have this signs that say this is financed by European Union, but nobody really notices this. So how come? And I always tell a story, an experience that we made in my region. Maybe you've heard it. We used the technical assistance some years ago to make a campaign, an information campaign on the use of structural funds in Saxony-Anhalt. It was a video It was it was text in newspapers and everything. It was a huge concept. Cost about 1 million euro, and we used the technical assistance that could be used for that. 2 years later, there were the auditors who arrived, and they checked it and came to the conclusion this was not fraud but misuse of structural funds. They said, in reality, you did not promote or communicate the use of structural funds, but you tried to promote your region, and we had to pay back 1 million euro that we had used from the structural funds. And other regions made similar experiences. You can imagine how big the interest over there is to do this again. And my question is, how is it possible to inform about the use of structural funds abstractly without using examples from specific questions?
This is a key point. This is my work is legal work in the parliament, and I had the meeting with the heads of communication of the 28 member states. Exactly. And they said, why don't you do it? And they said, at the end of the debate, said, it's illegal. They say, okay, we changed the regulation. We are now at stake to make the 2020-2027 regulation. And here we made the first step. So that's the thing. Your information is so essential. Don't blame the auditors, blame ourselves.
Okay, I won't discuss this, but what I have proposed to DG several times is to give information to the users of structural funds how they can use technical assistance for communication, so that they know if we do this or that, we are on the safe side. This is the point. They can be sure that they do something they will not be punished for afterwards. Financial instruments. My region was one of the first who made use of financial instruments, and I remember Danuta Hübner several times praising us for this. Today we are very far away from using financial instruments. We use it sometimes, but we try to avoid it. Why? Because things have become so complicated for civil servants who do the work, or for a small regional investment bank, that the danger to make mistakes, to make failures, is so huge that they prefer not to use financial instruments, but to send people to the bank, to the experts, and so. So, in our opinion, we say financial instruments, okay, they have their merits, but there should not be any obligation to use it, especially not in a special amount or percentage of the funds for a region that should be used for financial instruments. As you said, there's a wide variety in the European Union of situations, and it has to depend on the local, on the regional situation, on the circumstances, what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. There was one more issue now, I forgot it. Maybe I'll come back to it later.
Well, you reflect on that. I would like to develop
infrastructure. Okay, please, infrastructure.
Yeah.
Once again, I say Saxony-Anhalt, my region. We became members of the European Union 1990 when the German reunion took place. We were in East Germany in a similar position like Romania, like Bulgaria, Poland, and others. When they entered the European Union. And in my region, it was the first that we had to do to build the infrastructure, to use the new money that we received from the structural funds to build an infrastructure as a precondition for economic development. And we have in my region, there are parts who are far away from the centers, and today the highways are there, and there is growth, and there is investment and everything. And I have full understanding for member states, for example, like Bulgaria, where I had meetings on these topics, where they say first we have to build highways before we can do all the other things that are also important, but as a precondition, we need the infrastructure. You can see this everywhere.
Yeah. Absolutely. I would like to dwell further on a range of issues which has been raised before giving the space for questions. And that's also related to the future of Europe and the Eurozone. It is possible, it is likely, and there's already a draft legislation on the way to deepen the structural reform aspect of cohesion policy. Help using EU money of all European taxpayers to actually help to improve the governance seems to be a good idea. But, and coming to link to the issue of subsidiarity that you are obviously very much involved in, might also be seen as a way of being too intrusive into the country. It's like this proposal that we had last December to amend the structural fund regulations to foster structural reform. There's even some money that is being notionally allocated, but it's not clear in which sense and how actually the national subnational authorities can actually do that to their own circumstance rather than just being told from Brussels. In the context, perhaps, of the future of Europe, this is both a necessary but a risky, sensitive thing. And I would like to have your views about how that is possible. The more so as perhaps some countries will have to do a lot of structural funds, others will have less, and that will generate another comparative friction, so to speak. So, any would like to comment on that?
I think it's always difficult, when changes have to be made. Because now you know what you have and how it works. I think EPP will go in the direction of have stronger relations between macro or conditionality and the spending of the money. This is for me quite clear. The way you do it is we didn't have that good experience with the ex-ante with this macro conditionality with where two countries came up. It was Spain and Portugal that did not fulfill to their obligations and blah, 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 blah. At the end, Commission didn't take any fines at all. So it did not work, and we were even happy that it didn't work. But can't we do it in another way, more creative? Let me say, 80% of the envelope is going to the member state, of course, what they deserve, or region, you get it. But 20% is locked. I just a proposal. It's rather easy. Locked in, and if you fulfill normal country-specific recommendations, a thing that we agreed on to make a new economy, competitive economy, not losing like that. We lost on the whole new thing. If in Germany, that the 5 companies that did not exist in the United States in the ICT world is now worthwhile on the beurs more than the whole German DAX in 15 years. So the next 15 years will go faster. So we have to get in another way on our share together. So this might be something that if you work, then you don't have to take the money back because the money doesn't flow. And if you are stubborn and you want to do your own things, okay, do your own things. I don't say that you can do your own things, but you then get the money. To get, and if it's publicized, let me say next week, it's not so stupid. I don't say it will be publicized, but sometimes the world changes overnight because wise people come with wise proposals.
Well, I have made so many speeches on the nature of cohesion policy, and for me it is essential. I used to say it's historically the first time that there's a union of states that has established a system of solidarity,
Of course.
based in the treaties, and the treaties define absolutely clear what is the purpose of cohesion policy. The purpose of cohesion policy is economic, social, territorial cohesion. That's why 1/3 of the budget is spent for economic, social, territorial cohesion, and not structural funds, and not acceptance of migrants, and not this and not that. So I always say we have to keep things clear and don't mix up things that haven't got to do anything with each other. On the other hand, these funds can only work for their purposes if some conditions are fulfilled. And Here we come to the topic of ex ante conditionalities, and we are very much in favor of ex ante conditionalities. If there is an agreement with the member states, let's say, or the regions, before the money is spent, about certain conditions that have to be fulfilled, so that this money can be used in the purpose that it is meant for. And this, I think, this has proven the right way, and it can be developed more and better in the future. And these they can be part of agreements that be made. So before, not after, not before. And if there's no agreement, we have no money. Yeah.
Exactly. Mutual accountability. So.
Yep. Just briefly, maybe, because Michael Schneider, he's absolutely right with the scope of structural funds, the cohesion policy. So clearly, while we invest to build highways, airports, railways, the scope is to bring goods faster from one corner to another, bring people faster, generate access. So in one simple word, it's to improve competitiveness. To me, this element, competitiveness, is very important. So it's to improve competitiveness of our economies, of our regions, and of course of the enterprises, primarily the private sector. And while we spend money to improve competitiveness, to make it easier for goods to move, to have access to go to global markets and so on, while we spend money to improve competitiveness, I think it's reasonable to tell countries that while we spend money to improve competitiveness, please in parallel also make some efforts to improve your competitiveness. And please don't make decisions which worsen your competitiveness. Streamline your public administration, make sure that your labor laws are, labor codes are flexible and so on. In simple words, those reforms which we know countries need, they are written in the country-specific recommendations. Our countries are not yet fulfilling them at 100% because some are politically difficult, politically unpopular, some, but we know they are needed. And this is why I am supportive of this type of conditionality. While we're giving you the structural funds, please take some of the measures which your country needs in order to be more competitive. But this conditionality should be phrased in a positive manner, in the sense that we do not want a union which sanctions, because that only fuels populists, but we want a union that rewards, along the lines described by Lambert before. This is the amount, and if you take some measures which we know are good for your economy, and you know it, the measures might be a bit unpopular, but they will help you in the long term, then there is something on top. And just look at France now. Reform is difficult. Change is always difficult to implement. So that's why we need rewards for this in any case. And this is why I am supportive of conditionalities, which at the end of the day help us reach the original objective of this policy, which is to bring us closer together, to become more competitive, to move faster, easier, and at cheaper costs.
Right, thank you. I think we have talked a lot about Brussels in Brussels jargon that perhaps...
And just one more issue, sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
I think the people also expect that. The people want to make sure that while we spend EU money, we don't only spend it well, but we manage to implement some change on the ground. So that's why I think, if we find the right conditionality, the acceptance for spending funds at EU level will also increase with our voters. I think we also owe this to the taxpayer to show them that, money is used in a way in which it leads to change and money is well spent.
Indeed. I think we have opened the time for discussion. The gentleman on the back, and then the other gentleman.
My name is Antoine Poppe. It was Wilfried Martens who was my tutor at the University in Leuven, so that I got high distinction. Then I was strategic advisor of Albert Copé of the European Coal and Steel Community in Luxembourg. And we worked day and night. The lights never went out in Luxembourg. When I look now back as a 78-year-old entrepreneur who is in artificial intelligence for e-health, Tomorrow we talk with people in San Diego because I will probably get my money from America and not from Europe. So if I may be a little bit critical and join Mr. Van Nistelrooy, who I know by name and a little bit visual since a few years, if I may be a little bit critical about the European Union, we as young guys at university, we were tremendously enthusiastic about European Union. We expected we would become, with our culture, with our background, with all our inventors, we expected to become the largest power in the world. At a certain moment we have been it. But where are we now? As Mr. Van Nistelrooy mentioned, who are the 4 biggest companies now who only were built up in 15 years? In America. What do we have in Europe? Not so much to be proud of. We have even in Europe not one unicorn on 700 million people. In my field, in e-health monitoring, has been spent so far, I think 3 or 4 billion euros. There has been afterwards no control on the spending, and I don't find any practical instrument or technology or software that came out of this 4 billion. So I advise my European friends, because I still very European-minded, I think Europe should come out now not about spending, but about the results. And if you don't bring to the public your results, concrete results, which the people will applaud, I think in the new elections, the gauchists and the people who will tell you that you are all profiteers, they will gain the majority in the parliament. And where will we be then? So listen to an old man a little bit, and it might be a good turnaround for Europe. Thank you. And congratulations once more to a little bit younger friend, Mr. Van Nistelrooy.
I'm not so young. I'm not so young.
You said a little bit young.
Oh, a little bit, yeah. The gentleman over there, and then the gentleman on the back.
Maybe you're younger than me.
Try to, if possible, be short, because I realize actually
Thank you. My name is
than I thought.
Thank you. My name is Zoltán Gyéva. I'm a Brussels-based Hungarian correspondent. I have 3 questions. The first question is Mr. Muresan. For Mr. Muresan, you mentioned that the European Parliament wants to increase the spending level from 1% to 1.3%. Would it entail any cuts for the traditional policies like CB, Cohesion Policy and CAP? Or it would keep at the level of EU27 as things are standing today? The second question is, are you in favor, it's for everybody, are you in favor of a political conditionality? Because we are talking about conditionality. I never heard you mentioning this terminology of political conditionality, which would include some kind of rule of law mechanism linking the EU payments, and not only the cohesion policy payments, to the respecting of rules. So I think this is the second question. And the third one is about the eligibility issue, the criteria issue. Mr. Schneider, you mentioned that you are in favor of keeping the GDP as a reference. But we know that the Commission is heading towards another direction, which would include more other new elements like social ones, unemployment for youngsters, and also, for example, the migration. So which would shift some part of the money from the eastern member states towards the south. Do you think so, that it is a good attitude? This is the right way to do it? Thank you.
I think we should, since there are several questions, address them now, and then we'll have the gentleman on the back and the lady in the front. So.
Yes, very quickly. In our resolution, the Parliament, before the Commission presents next week its proposal, we said we want to see increases in some areas where we feel demand is high, research innovation, Erasmus, where we feel money is not enough, where also in the yearly budget procedure we're trying to increase the amounts a bit in comparison to what the Multiannual Financial Framework has foreseen, just because we see that, number one, needs are high, number two, projects submitted are very good. Research innovation, or in Erasmus, more students want scholarships than we can finance. So there are some areas where we said we need to do more. Then there is areas which have become new priorities. I've spoken a bit about it in the beginning. On security, on defense, we need to do more together, securing our external border and so on. When it comes to the traditional policies, we say no less in the next MFF than in the previous MFF. When it comes to political conditionality, my opinion is that, of course, the rule of law is important. And it's fundamental of the European Union, and it's something that we want to see preserved in every single member state. And when there were attacks upon the rule of law in my home country, when I advocated for a strong European involvement, engagement on this topic, those politicians who want to see a weaker rule of law said, but why is this Europe's business? And I said, well, it is because we're living in a continent of free movement, and you want to know that in every single corner of Europe the law is respected, because also as an individual government you want to know that if your citizens are living in another member state, the law is observed there and applied. And the same if your companies are living in another country, you need to make sure, if your companies are investing in another country, you need to make sure that you can trust the judiciary, the independence of the judiciary in that country. And this to me is fundamental. And in Romania, since the beginning of last year, when the current government tried to weaken the rule of law, the fight against corruption, negatively affect the independence of the judiciary, people went to the streets in huge numbers, hundreds of thousands of people. And they went to the streets defending these values, which, as I said, they are what the EU is about. They went to defend that with EU flags. So at the end of the day, if politicians are affecting the rule of law, I want to see them, sanctioned. But what I think is very difficult, and what I wouldn't subscribe to, is find a mechanism which at the end of the day makes the beneficiaries suffer as a consequence of decisions made by some politicians. And this is why so far, based on the proposals which I've seen, I said I can't support that type of direct link. If politicians make decisions through which they try to attempt the rule of law, that we are moving towards cutting funds from which the final beneficiary, be it a farmer, an Erasmus student or a researcher, is affected. But this is clearly an area which so far we have spoken about in very general terms. Rule of law, what exactly does it mean, and I think we have to make that also more concrete, more quantitative, and so on, and see, what is the pill which we have to apply so that those politicians which are tempted to make wrong decisions will not make them anymore because of the punishment which will be implied upon them. If, we just invent a pill which at the end of the day would make final beneficiaries suffer, final beneficiaries which are pro-European and which you do not want to lose for the European cause, then I have bigger reservations about.
Political conditionalities. It's not an easy question of yes or no. We have to differentiate. I absolutely support the demand that the rule of law has to be supported, and we have to do everything in the European Union to enforce the rule of law. The question is, what are the appropriate instruments? And there comes my no. I think structural funds are not the appropriate instrument when they are used as a sanction. When there is an adopted operational program and 2 years later, 3 years later, the European Union comes and says, now we take back the money from you that we have agreed that you get. Other way around could be a question that has to be discussed. Independence of law, of courts, as a precondition for the legal use of structural funds. In this way, I think we have to debate it, but not as a sanction afterward. And let me put it in a wider context. If we start to use structural funds as a sanction for rule of law or solidarity, I think there will be a lot of creativity to find more objectives or more reasons to use structural funds as sanction. For example, the grade of corruption in a member state. Somebody comes, if there's more than 50% than the average of EU, then there's a reduction of 2/3 of structural funds. Or organized crime could also be an intelligent idea. But I'm talking ironically, okay? Not misunderstood. So that for example, Italy, who has organized crime, well known, but they are advocating for using structural funds as sanctions in other member states, that they also could become victims of this idea. You see, it's grotesque. We should not start at all. But as ex ante conditionalities, yes. Eligibility was your question. My remarks are directed to the architecture, the general architecture of different types of categories. On the level below, when it's about the distribution of money inside the member states, I think there we need more indicators and better indicators for appropriate use and appropriate distribution of this money.
That's in fact, I think, the solution. The solution is that a member state, together with the regions, get much more flexibility. And if you think that Europe is like this cafeteria, you can have everything. It's dead, you know, it's nothing. Make your choice after a political debate in your member state. And this is also important. I come from a net payer, you know, they are also there. And there should be a new balance in that. And that it can be spent broader, whether you spend it out of your own budget, your own income as a member state, or you use European money. Because you see more added value, make your choices there. So a bigger flexibility for the member state. You don't have to play on every field on European scale quality. What you can. And the second thing is, in terms of what you said something about the shift of Eastern Europe to Southern Europe.
It's in the newspaper.
I don't know. We will see. But in some way, I have a positive feeling about unemployment as a criterion. But then immediately, not the festivity of Sicily anymore. You know, this is the tough rules. And see results for young people. And it is not correct that we... I said maybe not the best words about Poland, but I can tell you in the Netherlands that in the agriculture and in the horticulture we can't even fulfill the production without Polish people. We take the best of the Polish to us, and then the winner takes it all. You know, there should be this new equilibrium in these member states in Southern Europe. They deserve this extra action. And in some way, I think I can go in that direction, and under one condition. The one condition is that the social fund, European Social Fund, stays an integral part of our three funds: Cohesion Fund, ERDF, and the Social Fund, and in good connections with the maritime and the rural development second pillar. This is something that I want to say, because we have to fight unemployment, and we have to fight this mobility of the young people, and we have to fight for the fact that when I went to Romania, it was the city of
Cluj.
Cluj. EPP-driven government that really makes a choice, and that makes an attractive environment where Siemens comes, and that but my lord, it's Romania. What is Romania? Make your choice. Do it 10 years. This is structural policies, and not just an investment or a cherry on the cake here and there. It's worthless. So we have to make choices in Europe into the new economy, in a social-driven economy, environmental, sustainable, good thing. And we can do it. So not everyone with the same recipe. Make your own recipe. Come on. We can have a 7 years agreement, a partnership agreement for 7 years in this funds. This makes it a little attractive. Not being everyone equal. Nonsense. Same chances. Yes.
Thank you. I look on the organizers or the hosts to see we have like...
I have to leave in time. Sorry.
Okay. I think... so yes, you just... Yeah.
I have a meeting.
I think we're going to leave it here. I'm sorry for that, but I mean there's other meetings, and I think it's been a useful discussion. I think you didn't shy away to go through the challenges and the difficulties. One thing is having the ambition, and then you have to actually handle that. And I think you're going to be three very busy men in the next few days and months ahead. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.